Today we have a world-class author and scout, as he calls himself on his LinkedIn profile, and also somebody I know as a management consultant and as a board member on many companies, talk on the subject of the alternate universe. Sorry, the reason we call it the alternate universe is because this universe is not making too much sense, at least to guys like me. So rules are changing so fast. We are looking for this alternate universe where all these rules will make some sense. So, so that's basically the context. Too much change, massive change, unprecedented, and because it's unprecedented, I think the issue also is a little bit of a dark tunnel, right? So, what's going to come next, and what does the future look like, and what is the predictability of what's going to happen for my business and to my people and to so much else that is kind of being talked about at this point in time. So that's really the context, Jairam, and the subject matter of this discussion. So without too much ado, I want to kind of hand over to you, welcome you to this debate, and ask you to kind of take off and tell us how you see the crisis and what's going to come ahead of us.
Thanks, Deepak. First of all, thank you for having me here. And, I see myself as a storyteller now. So I tend to see everything within that framework of storytelling. I look for, the pivotal moments, and I look for the plot, and I look for where it's all going. So to that extent, I'm going to look at this whole scenario right now from, those lenses of mine. You also said that this alternate universe, what is happening, never before, unprecedented. I can hear a lot of these words being used everywhere. You and me are up to here listening to prognosis from so many people on what is going to happen and what needs to be done. Let me tell you one thing, that what is happening today is not anything new. It's just happening at a global level, and hence we are all standing there frozen like a deer in the headlights of a car. It's fear that's making us do that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at this now. The coronavirus, there is definitely an existential threat to individuals, to companies, and possibly to the finances of countries. But this existential threat is not coming for the first time. It's because of corona today. But there have been instances in the past when individuals or companies or nations have felt this threat. Let me take it step by step. Let's look at individuals. Have we never been laid off? Have we not had a situation where suddenly we are told that the head of the family has died in a car accident? In an acquisition or a merger, there are cases where suddenly everything changes around you. All your plans go for a toss. Look at the Nirav Modis and the Vijay Malias. When these guys scooted, surely a lot of their employees have faced, and actually they're going through this existential threat today. Look at airlines. Jet Airways went bust much before the coronavirus hit this industry. And what happened to those employees? So the real question is, we have all faced such situations, and who are the ones who overcome it successfully, and who are the ones who actually fall by the wayside? I think these are the questions to be answered when it comes to this aspect. I have faced 2 layoffs in my career working with American companies. Now, what happens at that stage, I can share with you, and how to come out of that. Because, I believe in one thing, and it's not my belief, but this is a truism, that life swings between the immutable laws of tears and joy for every individual, irrespective of your material status or other status. You will have your share of tears and joy. Life and living is all about creating that hope and overcoming it. One of the things I have learned when I got laid off, and this is something that a few friends of mine who went through this also told me, one is that you're not alone. If you choose to see it and allow it to affect your self-worth, and you continue to keep it to yourself and wallow in your fear, let me tell you, the biggest threat is the mind is a very funny thing. If you do that and wallow in your own fear, the mind will take you into such dark spaces that you will not want to come out of it. So the most important thing is reach out. Share it with your family. Share your fears. Share it with your children. Share it with your friends. After all, it is no fault of yours. Like Stephen Covey says, there's the circle of concern and circle of influence. What is happening today or a layoff is circle of concern. So the best way to overcome it is to look at your own support system. And the next thing you need to do really And that will invariably happen when you sit down with the family. What are the essential things that we need? And what are the desirable things that we need in our life? And believe you me, everything will be cut to the bone and the bare essentials will be taken care of. A lot of us in the lockdown are realizing that we are forced to cut down and we are only buying what we need because that's the only thing that's available. But hopefully this should become a habit and we should realize, that essential, yes, desirable, let it wait. So I'm
So
not too frightened about this.
what you're saying is the new normal
Mm,
is one
mm.
in which I, as an individual, must reconcile with the reality of what this crisis has created and
Yes.
find the strength within myself
Mm,
and the close ones that are around me to be able to tackle it with the confidence that this is not the first or the last crisis in my life. I've handled crises before.
yes. Existential threats are bound to occur because the circumstances around us we don't control. But how we are learning to deal with this existential threat because of corona is going to help us or obviously overcome other existential threats that we are going to face as individuals and as families.
So when you look at the captains
Hmm.
of our industry, our
Yeah,
society.
so I'll try and address that next because I was moving from the individual to the corporate and the CEOs.
Let's come to that.
Yep. You see, just before the lockdown, I was on the Business World jury for choosing Excellence in HR Awards. And the chairman of a jury was Mr. Charles Frump, Frump with an F, the CEO of Volvo in India. He has worked in many parts of the world, many geographies, many cultures. He's a Canadian working in this company, and he was there. And in his interview with, there was a one-on-one with the chairman of Business World, Anurag Batra. The first question that Anurag asked him, and it was so prophetic. Anurag asked him, Charles, you've been on to many geographies and suddenly you're parachuted into a new geography as the head of the business there. What would be your advice to people who get into similar positions like you? Suddenly they have to take on a new company and a new person. What are the 1, 2 things you would give them as an advice based on your experience? And he said, the first thing I think I would advise them is that as a CEO, you are not expected to have solutions to every problem. You're not a Superman CEO. Yes, there is no harm. In fact, there's an advantage in letting your team know that you are also vulnerable, because that is the time you will get the best out of them in terms of advice. What we do, it is an old saying, the head that wears the crown is very lonely. But I think that's in those days. Today, a CEO, if he wants to carry his team with him, he must be willing to share his vulnerability. He should be willing to share his fears. Of course, not start biting his nails and saying, guys, I don't know what to do. That's not expected from that role. But if you get the drift of what I'm saying, that's where then people will step up to be with you. That's point number one. The other thing that CEOs need to do, and this is something that has always occupied my mind, because organizations play with the same kind of resources. They play with the same kind of talent, middle class education talent. They play with the same kind of money, the same kind of interest rates. But some companies grow from strength to strength, others fall by the wayside. And the only differentiating thing in this is the organization culture. And culture, in my opinion, is nothing but the way people behave, the philosophy and values, and what converts into behavior. Now, a lot of CEOs, they have this wonderful dream of having empowered employees. They want employees who are empowered and they'll be completely with the company. Sense of belonging needs to be high. But this doesn't come by accident. Now, what does empowerment mean? And in my dictionary, again, not original, but something I picked up along the way, empowerment is if you walk into any company and talk to some of those low-hanging employees who are out there and make a demand which is not in their portfolio or within their command and control, see how they respond. Either they disappear, or they tell you they don't know what to do, or they will work within the hierarchy and get you the kind of support you need. I would say that CEOs need to start doing this when they get back. Like in marketing, you have this mystery customer, right? To figure out from the shops, what has the shopkeeper understood about the brand.
Yep,
Get,
yep.
get an organization like yours to send some mystery people and see whether the people are empowered. And if they are not, they better think about it and start doing something. And of course, the third important thing for them is the first role of a CEO is to allocate resources, be it people or money. Let him play that role. So let him get back and quickly allocate resources from what is essential, what is desirable, and then get everybody involved. And while he continues to say that, we are all going to collectively do it, make sure everybody sees it as being done collectively. Let there not be two norms, one for the people at the top and one for the others. I think collectively the whole organization can overcome.
The third part, what you said, I have a question about. So let me ask that question.
Yes.
I don't deny the role of the CEO in being able to allocate
Right.
resources, right? And you talked about it very quickly, what is important, what is. But tell me, are there things that are going to become more important in the eyes of the CEO as you proceed ahead? Or are we, you see, but the sense that I get there, Ram, is that this is not linear. Whatever programs and things you were doing for the last 2 years, let's just pick them up and kind of push them forward, right? I hear from so many CEOs, cash is king, right? If I can survive for one more year with very depressed revenues,
Yes.
right, or with non-existent kind of revenues, then I think my chances of kind of looking at this.
So I'd like to step in here. What you're saying is very correct. I have heard some of your videos, and this is what some of those very eminent people have said. Now let's look at what drives the CEO. What drives the CEO is really the board. It's the board that sets the objectives, and what drives the board is the market, the share price. I think you said it sometime during this conversation earlier, that the new norm is going to be that companies, the market, will all learn to live with flat growth or maybe small growth. That should be put in place immediately. So the pressures on the CEO from the board must not be there. The board itself must be understanding. That's one point. But there's something which is very, very important for us, because there are CEOs and there are CEOs and there are CEOs, if you understand what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Whenever I consult in organizations, I tell them the story about Walter Cronkite. See, Walter Cronkite was on the, I think, 10 o'clock news in CBS in the 70s. And when people who used to pool their cars, when they used to go together in the morning, and one guy had the New York Times in front of him, he'll say, the New York Times said this happened. The other guy would say, did Cronkite say it last night? And they did a study on, and then there was some research done, quick research done twice or thrice, and Cronkite came across as the most trusted man in America. And they studied him, his body language, the way he spoke, the words he used. But the operative line here is the most trusted man in America. There's such a huge trust deficit today between employees and the top management. The first question I ask CEOs is, are you the Walter Cronkite? And how many Cronkites do you have in your company? This is, if they've already done it in the past, let me tell you, they will sail through this much faster. But if they have not created that kind of credibility, here is an opportunity, since everybody is in a boat which is leaking, to create that credibility, create a lot of Walter Cronkites, and people will then stand by you. So there's one more point I wanted to make.
Go on.
This existential threat doesn't come from an outside, something coming to us from outside, like a layoff or something like that. Existential threat is something sometimes we create for ourselves in this industry. And let me give you an example and a reason why I'm saying it. Many, many years ago, I think one of these famous magazines, business magazines that in America, they did a study, and they asked Fortune 500 CEOs, what's your biggest nightmare? 65% of them said being found out. The problem I've seen around me also is, when you're a function head in a big company, you will easily get a job as a CEO, because the search firms will push your case, companies will hire you. But the roles are so different at these two levels. And once you go there, then you realize you have taken on something beyond your pay grade, but then you try to cover up and protect it. I think now that the coronavirus has done some reset for all of us, my advice to you guys is, when you're looking for a job in the future, make sure you're very clear, do you have the competencies for the job or not? Otherwise, you will continue living with that nightmare, of being scared to get found out. Forget the coronavirus. How often we create these kinds of existential crisis between in our own selves, that nobody talks about, but I'm just using the opportunity to talk about it.
So this is the low tide and it's all showing.
You got it. You bang on.
I think you've addressed a lot of the themes here. I don't know if you have any final comments on people and culture, which is a theme heading out there. But I think you've talked a lot about it as part of the.
Yeah, but I see I play golf with a lot of very well-heeled people, whom God has been very kind and given them materially much more than what they really deserve, and possibly also more than what they need. I'm saying it in a tongue-in-cheek manner. But I think these are the ones, who believe they are entitled. And they're the ones who worry about, from 5-course meal, it becomes a 4.5-course meal. They say, oh my God, the world is now going to the boondocks. And I think all these entitled ones now are slowly also going to be reset. And that's a good thing for all of us.
Wonderful, Jairam. I think this is great stuff. There are some great takeaways from this discussion. And thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to catching up with you personally at the end of whatever is happening. And we can all get out of our houses and travel.
Yeah, and laugh it off. And thank you very much, Deepak. I am obliged to you for having thought of me for this conversation.